What's up, guys? My name is Joseph, and I'm pretty sure that me reviewing this movie is probably not why you clicked on this video. But before you click away, I would love to tell you about why this movie was so inspiring and basically completely motivated me to make a video like this, which is one that I had been wanting to make for a while. And of course, the main theme of this video is just make your movie. A brief story time. Me and my buddy Isaac went and saw this movie, Rats, the other day. I was just scrolling the Alamo app. They tend to show a lot of movies that don't play at other theaters, so I like to browse it occasionally. And I scrolled across this one movie called Rats with this image, and immediately it gave me the impression that this was a movie made by people who simply had a camera, and so they decided to make a movie. Right off the bat, even just from this one image, I had the sense that this movie did not care about being quote-unquote cinematic. It did not care about equipment or gear or budget. This looked like a movie that a bunch of friends had made because they wanted to make something fun. It looked like they literally just made a movie for fun. And so, of course, we went and watched it, and that is exactly what it was. This was straight up a movie that was simply made by a friend group for fun that made its way into theaters. This movie is about putting your money where your mouth is, saying, well, I've always said I wanted to make a movie. I technically can. What am I waiting for? That's really why this movie was so inspiring and why I felt inclined to make this video. Because I genuinely can't remember the last time I saw such an independently made, DIY amateur film make it into a theater and get any kind of recognition. This is a movie that is straight up about the writing and about the characters and about the vibes. And I honestly think that it is those vibes, quote unquote, that I latched onto on this movie. Because as you're watching, you can just sense how much fun it was making this. You can sense how creative they felt. You can tell they didn't care if their movie came out looking perfect. They just wanted to make something. And what they made was a very cohesive and clear and exciting and hilarious vision. Anyways, I'll kind of touch back on this topic more at the end. For now, I would really just like to give a review of this film. I know that there's practically a 0% chance that anyone who has seen that movie is also going to be watching this video and vice versa. But I genuinely just want to talk about a film that I found insanely inspiring and insanely well made. And I'll do my best to try to find a way for anyone to watch it, because I believe that the creators both deserve an audience, and I believe that an audience deserves this movie. I'm not going to do a non-spoiler section since, again, I don't know that anyone who's watching this has seen the movie or will be able to. But right off the bat, I think the main thing that I have to describe about this movie is that it is a modern-day farce. This pushes its character interactions and personalities to the extreme. It is not afraid to get messy and dirty. It grosses you out. From the get-go, you get the sense that this is a movie that is not unconfident and knows exactly what it wants to be. You open on this scene of these two detectives who found another pair of disembodied hands, which is apparently something that they've been dealing with in the fictional city of Fresno, Texas. And these two detectives are basically just slinging one-liners at each other back and forth, most of them landing. And even the ones that don't land the hardest, you still have to respect that they took the swing, that they weren't shy, that they tried to utilize every second and every line to add some value into the movie. The plot itself is, again, farcical. Basically, the main character, Raphael, gets arrested for spray paint tagging a supposedly iconic telephone box in Fresno, Texas, by this absolutely psychotic police officer who continues to give him and his cousin problems throughout the rest of the film. But basically, in order to get out for good behavior, more or less, the cop makes a bargain with Raphael, saying that if he spies on his cousin, he can get on her good side. But the reason she wants him to spy on his cousin is because she, again, is psychotic and believes that his cousin is harboring nukes to sell to Osama bin Laden. The movie takes place in 2007, by the way. And so we spend most of the movie in Raphael's cousin's house, and it's almost just a hangout movie at that point. There are certain plot elements. For example, the two detectives trying to figure out the case of the missing hands. And obviously, you know that something has to end up happening with the whole spying on his cousin thing, even though it isn't actually true what he's spying on him for. But honestly, the meat and potatoes of this movie is just the character interactions and the lovely world building that they're able to do. This movie takes some very bold and interesting choices. Going back to the look of it for a second, and I in no way mean any offense by this, but obviously the movie didn't necessarily care how good it looked per se. I mean, things are properly exposed, you can see what's going on. It certainly doesn't detract from the experience, but what's awesome is that even with within these sort of limited capabilities, they still found ways to differentiate themselves and add character and personality to their film. The entire thing has this absolutely ridiculously saturated look to it. This movie also has goth and punk affinities, in terms of its politics and sentiments towards small town Texas, its sensibilities towards music and art. And there's this very fun, hand-drawn style to all the credits that they add in. They do a lot of fun, picture-in-picture editing. Say if there's a phone call happening, they'll show a video of, the other side of the phone call in this, sparkly border. There's some really fun transition moments. The editing has a lot of personality. There's a lot of comedy that comes straight from the cuts. Again, it feels weird talking so in depth about what I loved about this movie because it's almost like talking to a wall, which really sucks because I want someone to talk about this movie with. But either way, I just kind of want to go down the line and talk about things that I thought were really impressive or funny. Honestly, the biggest thing was just how funny this movie is. Funniest movie I've seen in a theater in years, maybe ever, honestly. And I know that it's probably just because I'm a college kid and so this kind of humor works a lot better on me than for most people. But also, I'm not going to let that stop me from enjoying it. I guess all of the side characters in this movie are standouts. Right from the beginning, again, we have those two detectives who keep coming on throughout the movie who have amazing banter and also act very well. And that's another thing throughout this movie is that everyone is incredible in their roles. 100% believable, or at least, again, since this is a farce, meaning that it pushes everything to the extreme, at least believable in their completely unbelievable nature. When Raphael first gets arrested, there's this guy in the holding cell with him who literally won't shut the fuck up, keeps on talking about the nastiest things, and Raphael is just bro, I don't care, and the guy just can't read the clues. Again, Officer Williams and her screeching and yelling and flailing, and there's literally a scene, I don't know how they shot this, I'm hoping it wasn't real, but there's literally a shot where we see Officer Williams taking a shit and the camera is in the toilet bowl. And all that implies. The fight scenes were done really well. There's this rapper named Flophouse who has a song called I Love Selling Crack, where the lyrics are just I love selling crack over and over, basically. But of course, at the end, when Raphael asks if he actually sells crack, he just goes, no, of course not, man. That stuff's been messing with my people for generations. This is a very sensible movie. Despite its grossed out nature, it has a lot of heart and a surprising amount of commentary. Even though this movie decides to delve into these topics in a way that seems to not take them seriously at all, you can certainly analyze this movie from the perspective that it is a farce because towns like this genuinely don't make sense to some people. They seem backwards and insane. Law enforcement seems like they can be out of control and have too much power with no checks and balances. The cast of characters that make up their town can be riddled with people who have unfortunately got addicted to drugs and do crazy things, or who just generally are less socialized and therefore tend to behave in more odd ways. But it's also not a movie that's making fun or belittling these people. It's almost highlighting them in a charming way, pointing out all the character and personality and idiosyncrasies that exist within these small towns. Though it is very critical of law enforcement, or at least of Officer Williams, who is basically operating on a power trip the entire movie. Besides for that, the relationship between Raphael and Mateo and Bernadette, who becomes Raphael's sort of love interest, but really just close friend and confidant by the end of the movie. The relationship that they all share is genuinely wholesome and sweet and touching. You can tell Mateo has so much love for his cousin and vice versa. All three of them are kind of like the straight man characters in this absolutely insane world that react to everything in the way that most of us probably would. And it's genuinely endearing to see them kind of use each other for support after going through all of the shenanigans that they have to go through and genuinely just sitting there wrecked. You just really believe the performances, and it ensures that this film isn't just this unrelatable, detached, complete farce. There is that human element that connects you and grounds you in this world and makes you care about what's going on and makes you care about what happens to the characters. This movie is also just so quotable. If you are ever able to watch this movie, please watch it within your friend group, and I can guarantee that it's just going to become a goldmine of inside jokes for y'all. I'm honestly really sad that I only saw this movie with one friend because it's something that you genuinely want to share with people once you've seen it. There's this running gag throughout the film where instead of saying hands whenever they find another pair of dismembered hands, they say Hans. Never explained. Every single character does it, except sometimes when you can tell the actors forgot and they do say hands and then they go back to saying Hans. I don't know if that's like a Fresno thing or a Pflugerville thing since that's where this was shot. God, there's also like this other side plot with these two, like with this couple where the lady really wants to be like a news anchor and she has this absolute sycophant of a boyfriend who's like her camera guy. And they basically just run around the city going to all these like grisly and like kind of gross occurrences and report on them. But at the same time, the two FBI agents are like watching this happen They're also really funny because they also act as these kind of straight man characters throughout the film, where they're just like, they came in from like the FBI and they're having to sit here and watch what the rats these crazy like small town locals do, and they're basically just like providing like backtrack commentary to all this stuff every time we cut back to them in this kind of meta way, which is really funny. Oh yeah, and there's this other hilarious joke where like all the people realize that they're FBI agents right off the bat. I can't remember exactly why, but it's something like they're staking out in like a plumber's truck or some kind of like repairman truck or something, and basically anytime someone in the town passes by, they're like, oh yeah, that's definitely an FBI van, that's just been here, but no one's come out of it or gone in. And the FBI agents are able to like hear everyone saying this about them, and they're like, rats, and they're like freaking out about it. Like I said, this movie is a modern day farce, and I honestly think that it works so well specifically because of this movie's amateur DIY nature, where it did not have to subscribe to any sort of big studio whims or better safe than sorries. But it's also not a movie that is like trying to do anything like so over the top and disgusting. It's not just trying to be like shocking and offensive in any way. It genuinely creates these insane, bizarre moments that are just truly comical and pushes them to the extremes. I was lucky enough to actually get to speak with one of the directors after the screening. They were selling t-shirts after the end of the movie. And I found out this movie was made for just a budget of $150,000. When was the last time you heard a movie made for that amount of money? But this movie isn't just impressive because it was made for very cheap and because it was done DIY. This movie is special because it was done cheap and DIY, and because I will remember it for the rest of my life. Because it is lasting and impactful and memorable and inspiring. Again, I have to imagine that the behind the scenes for this movie literally looked something like the friend group all sitting in a circle, probably smoking a joint, and just riffing about this movie idea that they had when one of them goes, well, rats, guys, I have a camera. And from there, they decided to make it. And that is what happened. You can literally tell that this was something that they did because they thought it would be fun, because they enjoy making movies, because they wanted to tell a story, and for no other reason. And as you're watching this, all of that hits. You feel that by watching it. You feel that love, and you feel that care, and you feel that energy, and you feel that passion. And it makes you want to give yourself into the movie more. I'm going to be releasing a video soon about this movie, Clerks, from 1994, which is a video that's actually going to be dealing with very similar themes to this video in terms of just make it. But there's a quote that I'll mention in that video, a quote from Robert Rodriguez about his making of El Mariachi for just $7,000 back in the 90s. And the quote is, take stock in what you have. Basically what this means is figure out what you can make a story about and really narrow in on that. To be frank, it doesn't make any sense to try to do something that's outside of your budget or outside of your capabilities or outside of what resources you have available. In the case of this movie, you can tell that what they had was the main house that they filmed in, a handful of cast and crew, likely made up mostly of friends that they were able to call on, some pretty good costuming, and a camera. And that's it. With that, they made a script that utilized those resources as far as they could be pushed. And they made something immersive and lasting. I genuinely don't know that I have ever been so personally inspired by a film. Even some of my favorite movies of all time that were made many decades ago for very cheap feel a little bit more alienating, because there kind of is a sense that maybe it was a little bit easier back then. Obviously, because of inflation, you wouldn't have needed as much money. Not everything was as saturated, and it was very likely that word of mouth could do a lot more back then, specifically because there were these kind of avenues and industries built around finding more independently made films, which of course still exists today. But still, to see a movie that was made in the 2020s that straight up looks like a Smosh YouTube video from back in the day, but still managed to find its way into film festivals and into theaters and into my heart, like, yeah, I genuinely don't think I've ever found a film more powerful than this one. Anyways, I can feel myself starting to ramble, so I think I'm going to go ahead and close this video off here. I really appreciate anyone who stuck it through to the end. I hope I didn't bore you too much. But really, I hope that highlighting this film was able to give you a little bit more of a push to maybe pursue some of the things that you have felt you weren't able to pursue because you didn't think you had the capabilities to do it. Again, this is a movie that is screaming in your face not to wait around. And they're telling you that, fine, if you want to wait around, we won't. You'll have to catch up. We're going to keep making stuff. Be sure to stay tuned for a couple of Mickey 17 videos that'll be coming out this weekend, a Clerks Micro Budget Mondays next week, and possibly a re-review of Anora, since I'm going to be rewatching it tomorrow since it won so many of the Oscars. Anyways, see you guys later. Bye-bye.